The Ford Starliner didn't just roll off the assembly line, it sliced into the American car scene like a concept car that accidentally made it to production. Today, we talk about muscle cars like the Mustang, the Charger, the GTO. But in 1960, Ford gave us something just as wild, only it came in full-size form with jet-age style, dragstrip power, and a presence you can't buy anymore. This is the story of the Ford Starliner, the muscle car that could have led Ford's performance revolution, if only they hadn't killed it 2 years in. Let's talk about design, but not the kind cooked up in a spreadsheet or committee meeting. We're talking about a time when car styling was an art form, and the 1960-61 Ford Starliner? That was a masterpiece. At first glance, the Starliner looked long, and it was. But more than that, it was lean, low, and sleek, as if someone had taken a jet, shaved off the wings, and dropped it on 4 chrome-trimmed wheels. This wasn't just a big coupe with a long trunk, it was sculpted by airflow. Everything about the Starliner's body shouted aerodynamics. The ultra-thin C-pillar wasn't just elegant, it reduced turbulence behind the car. The wraparound rear glass wasn't just stylish, it smoothed airflow across the back end. The gently sloping fastback roofline didn't just look fast, it made the car faster, cutting drag and giving it a genuine edge on the oval tracks of NASCAR. That's right, this wasn't just a showroom beauty. The Starliner was Ford's official NASCAR contender in 1960 and 1961. And it wasn't some fluke. That slick roofline helped stabilize the car at high speeds, allowing it to cut through the air cleaner than most of its GM and Mopar rivals. While other cars were punching through the wind, the Starliner slipped through it. And here's where it gets painful. We just don't get this kind of design anymore. Modern cars, especially full-size ones, have been forced into a box by government crash regulations, side impact standards, and pedestrian safety laws. You end up with thick A-pillars, stubby proportions, and built lines so high, you feel like you're sitting in a bathtub. But in the early 60s, you could still buy beauty off the showroom floor, and when you stepped inside the Starliner, it only got better. Forget today's sea of black plastic and tablet screens. The Starliner's cabin was a tribute to post-war optimism, a place where brushed aluminum trim, rocket-inspired instrument clusters, and stylish two-tone colorways welcomed you like the bridge of a spaceship. The dash didn't just display information, it performed. You had sweeping speedometers, dials set deep into chrome bezels, and controls that felt like switches in a jet cockpit. The bench seats? Wide enough to sprawl across, and trimmed in patterned vinyls or brocades that made the whole interior feel like a retro lounge on wheels. You didn't just drive the Starliner, you cruised in it. Even the steering wheel was an experience. A deep dish design with chrome horn rings and a rim you could wrap your whole hand around. No paddles, no haptic feedback, just a mechanical feedback, the real kind. The best part? This wasn't a luxury car. It wasn't even a top tier in the Galaxy lineup. It was simply a style-forward full-size coupe for people who wanted more than a slab-sided family hauler. In the Starliner, Ford wasn't selling a car. They were selling motion, freedom, and a little slice of the future. And for a very short time, they nailed it. The Starliner didn't just look like it belonged on a racetrack. It sounded like it had just rolled off of one. And if you were lucky enough to tick the right boxes on the order sheet, it pretty much had. Under that elongated hood sat a menu of V8s that turned this sculpted cruiser into a legitimate threat at any stoplight or drag strip. Base models came with a 292 cubic inch Y-block V8, respectable for a big coupe. But Ford wasn't interested in just respectable. The real fun began when you moved up to the 352 Interceptor V8, a motor that pushed out a strong 300 horsepower. That alone gave the Starliner serious punch in a straight line, especially for a full-size coupe. But in 1961, Ford stepped it up with the FE Series 390 cubic inch V8, and this is where things got rowdy. You could get it in several configurations, but the most infamous was the triple two-barrel carb setup. a six-pack arrangement making a brutal 375 horsepower. And if that wasn't enough, Ford quietly offered a high-performance version, 401 horsepower from the factory, thanks to solid lifters, a hot cam, upgraded internals, and zero apologies. Think about that. A 401 horsepower full-size Ford coupe in 1961. To put that into perspective, the 1964 Pontiac GTO, often credited as the first true muscle car, debuted with a 348 to 370 horsepower, depending on configuration, and the legendary 1969 Dodge Charger RT440 Magnum, rated at 375 horsepower. The Starliner was already knocking on the door of muscle car royalty before the genre was even officially born. And we're not talking about stripped-out race cars. These were street-legal, bench-seated, steel-bodied land yachts with enough torque to roast bias-ply tires at will, quarter-mile times in the 14-second range, and a car tipping the scales at over 4,000 pounds were nothing short of miraculous. And here's what makes the Starliner even more special. This kind of power wasn't reserved for some ultra-rare badge or limited-run special. There was no Shelby collaboration, no Cobra Jet graphics, no dealer-installed secret sauce. If you knew what to ask for, you could walk into a Ford dealership in 1961 and order a Starliner that would outgun most factory muscle cars for the next half-decade. That's like ordering a plain black iPhone and discovering it secretly runs NASA software. Today, performance is sold in bundles, paywalls behind trims, software locks, over-the-air tweaks, but back then, power was mechanical, raw, honest. No performance mode buttons, just displacement, compression, and attitude. The Starliner didn't ask you to swipe right on performance. It handed you the keys, cracked its knuckles, and waited. The Ford Starliner had all the makings of a legend: jaw-dropping looks, serious muscle, racing pedigree. So what happened? Why did Ford pull the plug after just 2 short years? In one word, marketing. In the early 60s, Ford was caught in a tug-of-war. On one hand, they had performance-hungry engineers pushing for fastbacks, dragstrip horsepower, and NASCAR credibility. On the other, they had marketing teams and executives chasing sales volume, image control, and broader appeal. By 1962, the tide had turned. Ford decided to ditch the Starliner's sleek fastback profile in favor of the more formal, squared-off box-top roofline used in the Galaxy 500. Why? Because surveys showed that buyers wanted more headroom and a more upright, conservative look. The same design that had made the Starliner a darling in NASCAR and a standout on the street was deemed too racy for mass-market America. So instead of doubling down on performance, Ford pivoted. The Starliner was quietly dropped from the lineup. No farewell edition, no final model run. It just vanished. And here's the irony. Within a few years, muscle cars exploded. The Pontiac GTO arrived in 64, the Mustang in 65, the Dodge Charger, Chevelle SS, Plymouth Roadrunner. The mid to late 60s became a golden age of muscle. And yet, the Starliner, a car that had already been doing 400 horsepower quarter-mile runs in 1961, was nowhere to be found. If Ford had stuck with the formula just a little longer, the Starliner could have been their GTO, their Chevelle SS, maybe even their Hemi killer. Instead, it became a footnote. What if? Today, it's easy to look back and see what Ford had in their hands, but at the time, full-size coupes with racing roots weren't considered hot sellers. They were seen as specialty items, too big for sports car fans, too wild for conservative families. In short, the Starliner was ahead of its time, and corporate didn't know what to do with it. Ford shifted its performance focus to smaller platforms, Fairlanes, Falcons, eventually Mustangs. The FE engines lived on, but the full-size performance coupe, that died with the Starliner. It's the kind of move that makes you shake your head. You can almost picture some marketing guy in a suit saying, "People don't want fastbacks anymore," as Starliner idles menacingly in the parking lot, ready to destroy a Corvette. Here's where it hits home. We lost more than just a nameplate. We lost a mindset. The Starliner was one of the last full-size Fords that balanced beauty, performance, and accessibility all in one package. It didn't rely on spoilers or scoops. It didn't scream at you. It seduced you. And it reminded us that a family car could still make your heart race. Think about modern muscle. Everything's supersized, digitally controlled, and bloated with safety regs and tech layers. You don't get hand-built feel. You don't get wraparound glass. You don't get cars designed with aerodynamics first and market research second. You certainly don't get a full-size coupe with dragstrip power and racing routes for less than a house deposit. The Starliner was peak optimism, a car that asked, what if we gave people style, power, and beauty, and just let them drive? Today, a real deal Starliner, especially one with an R code 390 or factory performance package, is rail material. They're rare, they're expensive, and they're getting harder to find. But every time one rolls across a Barrett-Jackson stage or thunders down a back road, it reminds us, Ford didn't just build a great muscle car. They built the perfect one, then made it disappear. And that's why we remember.